Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Satara Sata Shri Śrīmad. His Divine Grace, the Bhakti Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. His Confounded Acharya, Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki. Dhyana Lipa Vishnu Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Satara Sata Shri Śrīmad. Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki. Prem se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki. Shri Braja Bhumi Vrindavan Dham ki. Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki. Shri Jagannath Puri Chaitra Dham ki. Ganga Maya ki. Jamuna Maya ki. Bhakti Devi ki. Srimati Tulsi Maharani ki. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda ki. Go Premanandi. All glorious to some of the devotees. All glorious to some of the devotees. All glorious to some of the devotees. All glorious, Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. So we'll read a little bit from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. This chapter, this is volume 6. This chapter titled The Lame Man and the Blind Man. Everyone knows that analogy, right? You know that analogy? No. Dr. Alex, you've heard that? Lame man and the blind man. The lame man, he can't walk very well. The blind man can walk, but he can't see. So he puts the lame man on his shoulders, and then together they were able to get to their destination. So that's the analogy of the East and the West. And the Western civilization is considered to be a blind man. You know, he has no spiritual knowledge. That's why we say Om Jnanatam Andasya. He's covered by ignorance. And the analogy is that at India, at that time, when Prabhupada came, had no technology, no means to efficiently spread the Krishna consciousness revolution from within India. So Prabhupada left India, came to America, where hooked up with the lame man, and then the blind man, and then they became a very potent force for spreading Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada's young American disciples who were previously blind. So we'll continue where we left off. The Vedic literature mentions various spiritual paths and forms of yoga. Unless the commentator has realized the highest Vedic conclusion, he can easily miss the essential message of the Bhagavatam. Indeed, impersonalist commentators have attempted to use the Bhagavatam to support their speculations that the individual soul is in all respects one with the Supreme, even though this contradicts the purpose of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. As a commentator on the Vedic literature, Srila Prabhupada was distinguished even among Vaishnava scholars because of his being in a disciplic succession from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was glorified as Patita Pavana, the savior of the most fallen. As a follower, an empowered representative of Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada was faithfully and perfectly carrying on the tradition of rescuing fallen souls, bringing them back to their original Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada's making Bhagavatam's message available, therefore, did not mean mere simplification. It meant urgently addressing the reader to give up the world of illusion and take to the eternal liberation of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada was making available to the average reader spiritual truth that had been hidden and unavailable even to austere practitioners of yoga and learned brahmanas proficient in Sanskrit. Old wine in new bottles, Srila Prabhupada called it. The Vaishnavas' arguments against impersonalism had been chalked out by Madhvacharya and Ramanujacharya and later synthesized by Lord Chaitanya into the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, simultaneously oneness and difference. These eternal truths had to be presented in every age. But in the traditional debates between the Vaishnavas and the impersonalists, the authoritative basis had always been Vedic scripture. Modern society, however, was so degraded that a preacher could no longer appeal to the authority of the Vedic scripture. No one would accept it. Srila Prabhupada's writings, therefore, dealt with such theories as the origin of life by chance, Darwinian evolution, and chemical evolution. And he defeated them all with strong logic, establishing that life comes from life, not from dead matter. Prabhupada dedicated one of his first books, Easy Journey to Other Planets, to the scientists of the world, and had even adapted the Bhagavad Gita verses quoted in that book into scientific jargon of matter and antimatter. Deftly, he used both Shastra and logic to establish the Vedic conclusion. Prabhupada's writings also combated the false teachings of bogus yogis, gurus, and incarnations who had appeared like a tidal wave of falsity in Kali Yuga, both in India and in the West. His writings criticized modern political institutions also, analyzing why monarchies fell, why democracy was failing, and how dictatorship would increasingly harass the citizens. Sound familiar? The government's policies of abusive taxation and their propaganda to bring people to the cities to work in the factories, abandoning simple agrarian life, were all discussed in light of the scriptures. In his travels, Srila Prabhupada had observed the rampant degradation of human society, sexual liberation, the latest fads in intoxication, and the vicious crimes of animal slaughter and meat eating. A Bhagavad Gita purport dealt specifically with the threat of nuclear holocaust. Quote, such people are considered the enemies of the world because ultimately they will invent or create something which will bring destruction to all. Indirectly, this verse anticipates the invention of nuclear weapons, of which the world is today very proud. At any moment, war may take place, and these atomic weapons may create havoc. Such things are created solely for the destruction of the world, and this is indicated here. Due to godlessness, such weapons are invented in human society. They are not meant for the peace and prosperity of the world. End quote. Srila Prabhupada's criticisms were strong and authoritative, befitting a true acharya. His uncompromising spirit was appealing. He was not a timid scholar pointing out some obscure historical references. Yet underlying his writing, a humble tone of request spoke to the heart. As the servant of Krishna, he asked everyone to please take up Krishna consciousness and be restored to his original constitutional position of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Prabhupada was making his books practical But to do so required care and deep meditation, like we see in the diorama in Henry Street. Prabhupada waking up at midnight, chanting, and then translating up until Mangalarati. Quiet solitude, nothing moved. The temple was absolutely quiet, especially when Srila Prabhupada was in the temple. Everyone knew, don't disturb Prabhupada. No doors were slamming, no unnecessary talk. Everyone was completely respectful for the task at hand. Prabhupada was translating Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, such a sacred endeavor. And everyone was enlivened to be participating in some small way or another in that sacred activity. He combined the thoughtfulness of a textual scholar with the practical applications of a transcendental social and political reformer. So many scholars had already presented their English editions of Bhagavad Gita, yet not a single reader had become a devotee of Krishna. Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, as it is, however, was creating thousands of devotees. More than simply rendering valuable Vedic literatures, Srila Prabhupada had come to the West, starting in New York City, to establish a way of life based on that Vedic literature. Consequently, he had gained first-hand experience in bringing the most materialistic persons to the standard of renunciation and devotional service. His books, therefore, reflected these practical realizations, and many times in his purports he would relate his difficulties and triumphs in trying to introduce spiritual principles within materialistic society. In the 6th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, he had presented the story of Daksha's cursing Narad Muni, after Narada had instructed Daksha's sons in pure Krishna consciousness. The jealous father, considering Narada his enemy, had cursed him to be always traveling without any home. In his commentary, Srila Prabhupada had written that he had also been cursed by the parents of his disciples. Therefore, despite his having many centers around the world, he had to constantly travel and preach. And in the 7th canto, while commenting on the demon Hiranyakashipu's harassment of his son Prahlad, Srila Prabhupada had related the difficulties of the ISKCON devotees in distributing books amid the harassment of Hiranyakashipu's modern counterparts. Thus, Prabhupada was imbuing his literature with the thoughtfulness of his own personality, that of a pure devotee, faithfully dedicating his body, mind, and words in service to the Bhagavatam. As the word Bhagavata refers not only to narrations about the Supreme Lord, but also to the Lord's devotee, Srila Prabhupada was himself Bhagavata. And through his books, one could gain the inspiration of service to both the book and the person Bhagavata. Srila Prabhupada ki. This outfit was created by Mother Antaranga. So if everyone's appreciating this wonderful endeavor, please bless Mother Antaranga that she may continue to provide Sri Sri Radha Govinda such beautiful dresses. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 2nd canto, 8th chapter. What text are we reading from? 22. Okay, just checking. Chapter entitled Questions by King Parikshit. Everybody got it? Yo Vanushayanam Sarga. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga. Pashandasya Sambhava. Pashandasya Sambhava. Atmano Bandhamoksha Cha. Atmano Bandhamoksha Cha. Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Please chant. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga Pashandasya Sambhavaha Atmano Bandhamoksha Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga Pashandasya Sambhavaha Atmano Bandhamoksha Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga Pashandasya Sambhavaha Atmano Bandhamoksha Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga Pashandasya Sambhavaha Atmano Bandhamoksha Vyavasthanam Rupataha. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga Pashandasya Sambhavaha Atmano Bandhamoksha Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Ladies. Yo Vanushayanam Sarga Pashandasya Sambhavaha Atmano Bandhamoksha Vyavasthanam Sarupataha. Ya. All those. Va. Either. Anushayanam. Merge into the body of the Lord. Sarga. Creation. Pasandasya. Of the infidels. Cha. And. Sambhava. Appearance. Atmanaha. Of the living beings. Bandha. Conditioned. Moksha. Being liberated. Cha. Also. Vyavasthanam. Being situated. Swarupataha. In an unconditioned state. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Please also explain how, merged in the body of the Lord, living beings are created, and how the infidels appear in the world. Also, please explain how the unconditioned living entities exist. Purport. The progressive devotee of the Lord must inquire from the bona fide spiritual master how living entities merged in the body of the Lord again come back at the time of creation. There are two kinds of living entities. There are the ever-liberated, unconditioned living beings, as well as the ever-conditioned living beings. Of the ever-conditioned living beings, there are two divisions. They are the faithful and the infidels. Of the faithful, there are again two divisions, namely, the devotees and the mental speculators. The mental speculators desire to merge into the existence of the Lord, or to become one with the Lord, whereas the devotees of the Lord desire to keep separate identities and constantly engage in the service of the Lord. The devotees who are not fully purified, as well as the empiric philosophers, become conditioned again during the next creation for further purification. Such conditioned souls become liberated by further progress of devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj Parikshit asked all these questions from the bona fide spiritual master in order to become fully equipped in the science of God. Translation again. Please also explain how, merged in the body of the Lord, living beings are created and how the infidels appear in the world. Also, please explain how the unconditioned living beings exist. Om Jnana Tamrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lankayate Gurum Yatkipatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. So this interesting topics to become fully equipped in the science of God. This is not as detailed as some of the previous shlokas, dealing with the minutiae of the cosmic creation. Nevertheless, these are important questions that would come up in the mind of the inquisitive seeker of the absolute truth. We know from our previous traditions that there's the concept of hell, heaven, purgatory, other such places. To try to give some end game for religiosity. Right? Like the Kunj Bihari was discussing, they have the 4 principles that govern Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And of course, Moksha is only for the devotees, or those who are seeking that goal. Many people don't understand what is moksha, what is liberation. So they're only engaged in the first 3, Dharma, Artha, Karma. And by these things, of course, they're bound up. That's that word, bandha. They're bound up in the material world, birth after birth, even up till the time of dissolution. So even at the time of dissolution, we see that the living entities have to again take birth in the next cosmic cycle. They don't get any reprieve. It's not like because the prison burns down, everybody gets to go home. You know, the walls come crumbling and people just, now they're free again. No. For further purification. So just imagine what is the extent of this particular universe's time limits, the lifetime of Lord Brahma, what is that? There's also multiple devastations in between. Just consider it. There's partial devastations, and then there's complete devastation. When everything is wound up into Mahavishnu again, with his inhaling of breath. When he's exhaling, all the universes are created. And again, when he's inhaling, they're destroyed. So how long is that one breath? Did you get to that point yet, Alex? I think it's like 8.4 billion. That's the day of Brahma. The lifetime of Brahma, the one breath of Mahavishnu is 311 trillion years. That's a lot of zeros. And you have to take, if you don't complete, we're giving a sterling opportunity here to go home back to Godhead. Don't become Nitya Buddha. In one lifetime. One lifetime. And then there's those conditioned souls. Why do they call them ever conditioned? Because 311 trillion years is a long time. So even if you're so-called Satchidananda, just being in the material world for that long is enough to completely cover even the most, what does it say? That the living entities, when they enter into the material sphere, they don't start off at the lowest living entity, the lowest, what is that? Indragopa. The smallest jiva, the smallest living entity that the spirit soul enters into, the body. They start off at the topmost post as Lord Brahma. So what to speak? Everyone here has been in the topmost position. Of course, the topmost, that's in the material world. Everyone's in the topmost position eternally in their natural constitutional situation. But coming into the material world, you start off also at a very high post. Well, what is that post? And obviously we're here now, so that means we didn't take full advantage of that situation. So technically Lord Brahma, he can go right back home, back to God at the end of his life, the end of his 311 trillion years. He doesn't have to stick around. But there are some, and you've met them on Sankirtan, those persons who are so covered over. You wonder, how many cycles has this living entity been in the material world? You're talking, these are all old souls. Nobody just came here yesterday. They weren't born yesterday, although it may seem like it. All these souls here in the material world, they're all eternal. But they've been in the material world since time immemorial, Prabhupada would say. Time immemorial. And our duty is just to wake them up. Just to wake them up by presenting this, the topmost literature available, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Dharma projata kaitavo cha paramo nirma charam satam. So this is how Srila Prabhupada envisioned everything would be arranged. He didn't have to concoct some new idea how to present this philosophy. As a matter of fact, he avoided taking advice from those who said that you cannot go, and if you do go, you have to dress like this, eat like this. No, he ignored everything because he had complete faith. This is the symptom of the pure devotee. He had complete faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead's potency, that Krishna can do anything, and that if he wants to make him dance, he can make him dance. Very simple. There's simple for the simple at heart, difficult for the crooked. So we have to appreciate that we don't require to make some special adjustment to present the philosophy. When Prabhupada came in the 60s, as it's described here, the audience was completely bewildered by intoxication, false philosophy, rampant sense gratification. And somehow or other, and of course we cannot imagine the mind of the pure devotee. But how pleased Srila Prabhupada must have been when he saw how these Westerners were taking to Krishna consciousness. Miraculously. You have to say miraculously. Whereas in the land of Dharma, it wasn't happening. And Prabhupada preached in India for how many years? From 1944, he started Back to Godhead magazine. And he's delivering all these personally, overseeing everything, writing the essays, printing, distributing, preaching, and nothing. One disciple. What was his name? In Jhansi. He's on the Prabhupada Memories. Huh? Yes. That's it. Who can imagine? Now we know it's not Prabhupada's fault that people weren't listening. Somehow or other it was Krishna's arrangement. Why? Because his spiritual master told him to preach to the English-speaking audience. But this is it's Prabhupada's native tongue was not English, but somehow or other, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave him a specific mission. He had given it to others previously. You see, he's so much effort to send the sannyasis to London and then to maintain them, only to have them make a few old women as disciples. But somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord and the sincerity of the pure devotee, automatically this transformation took place in the hearts and minds of the fallen conditioned souls of the Western countries. This is a great miracle. People will eventually understand it. It's taken thousands of years for people to understand, just, the impact one person can have, on the consciousness of a population. And here we see, today we celebrate the 49th anniversary of the installation. But this is the 1965, Srila Prabhupada came, 1966, ISKCON was incorporated. So in 5 more years, it'll be the 50th, right? Is that not the 50th, the 60th anniversary. So this is, in one sense, it may seem quite a long time, but it's insignificant when you compare it to the way other philosophies had taken root, over the course of, like I said, thousands of years. So this is only 50 plus years. And it's a worldwide movement with literally millions of people following Srila Prabhupada. Millions of people. It's inconceivable. It's a like I said, it's an achievement that hasn't been fully noted yet. Because that's the nature of Maya. She is suppressing. There's we're making inroads into the hearts and minds of the conditioned souls. And Maya doesn't like that. Prabhupada said it's declaring war on Maya. Declaring war. So she's not without power. Maya is only killing the demons all the time. So, Lord Chaitanya came, Sangha Pasata Pasadam, Yagnai Sankirtana Paya, Yajanti Hi Sumedasa. He came to, specifically with his certain weapons, his angas, his devotees, and he would defeat them, not by killing them, but by liberating them, by killing their demoniac mentality. So this is the essence here that we see. And as far as infidels appear in the world, well, in Kali Yuga it says a demon and a devotee were in the same body. Isn't that a fact? And demons and the devotees are in the same body? Some more so than others. We see it. This is our practical experience, just like in the Lilamrita. Satguru Maharaj is writing that Prabhupada built on his practical experience how to present the philosophy. He saw what worked. This is the mark of the pure devotee. He knows how to adapt without changing the essence. Specific quality, specific trait of the Acharya, matter of fact. That's the definition. That he knows how to present the philosophy according to the time and circumstances without changing the essence. And this, of course, is important because why? We see many people experiment. And philosophy is not meant for experimentation. You know, there's mundane wranglers, these gyanis, these munis. They come and they go. You know, trying to make some influence, exploiting the people at large, taking some money and then disappearing. We've seen it time and time again. All those persons that were there in the 60s, where are they now? You know, they left and their philosophy collapsed. It's gone. There's a few remnants here and there. But it's nothing significant. This is the point, nothing significant. There's no life, no vibrancy. And Prabhupada said, what happens when these impersonalists, because they have no taste, they turn again to some mundane charitable work, opening up hospitals or educational institutions. What else did he describe? All types of mundane, pious activities, digging wells. What can these things do? What can such imperfect endeavors produce? Nothing. But they last for some time, and why do they do these things? In order to perpetuate the name. Just to perpetuate the name. So you'll have such and such hospital with somebody's name or some mission's name, right? But that's all you know about it, that mission. They have a hospital up the road, right, on Vrindavan, on Mathura Road. We won't mention the name. They have hospitals. But there's nothing tangible that can save the soul. And so they turn again to this, trying to execute some pious activities. But this is not the business of the Bhagavat, the person or the book. There's nothing in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that says open up hospitals. So where do they get such activities? Where do they get the concept that one should do such things? Here's Parikshit Maharaj asking questions so that he is fully equipped to present the philosophy. Of course, he's leaving, so this is not for his benefit, but it's for our benefit, so that we're equipped to answer the questions that he's kindly asking on our behalf. So we have such a benediction, and it's up to us to impress upon those we meet how important it is to finish your business in this material world and go back home, back to Godhead. And the only way to do it, this is the only literature that's capable of doing it. You know, we have it in small bites, or we have it in big bites, we have it in Bhakti stacks, we have it in Sapta stacks, we have it in Mahatattva stacks. All these books that Srila Prabhupada spent his time, like Easy Journey to Other Planets, dedicated to the scientists of the world. So potent. Who can imagine? Just one small. If you ask many devotees how they came to Krishna consciousness, some came just by reading the Back to Godhead magazine. Some came by reading the small pamphlets that used to be distributed. The Reservoir of Pleasure, which we still distribute. Who can imagine? Small pamphlet, few pages, completely changed the direction of a person's life and turns its face back to Godhead. So yes, it's miraculous. And it's happening all the time, you know, in other philosophies as well. You see people get some revelation and they understand, they get a glimpse of the eternal and they desire to pursue it, but ultimately they'll be frustrated because as we see, as we understand that this is not just one attempt, that the soul is constantly taking birth and dying and taking rebirth. And if he doesn't understand how to break that cycle, then his goal of attaining some situation like so-called heaven, this is incomplete. You know, it's not his fault. He doesn't have complete knowledge. So our business is to give them complete knowledge. Yes, we can acknowledge, yes, there is heaven. But that is not the goal. Simply expanded sense gratification. You see how some philosophies describe it. You know, you get so much sense gratification, so many virgins, so many this, so many that. Because that's how they extrapolate. In the material world, the highest pleasure is sex life. So what do they think? Oh yeah, you go back to some place and you get 72 virgins. That's not a very elevated philosophy. So the devotee is always separate, as it was described here. He doesn't desire to become one with God. He doesn't desire sense gratification separate from God. He simply wants to serve the Lord. Because this is, from previous shlokas, we understand, when we're reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, how all these relationships are there in complete fullness, one after another, until one reaches the ultimate goal, prema pumartha maham. But no one else can understand this without the benefit of hearing from the person or the book Bhagavata or their representatives. So that is why it is such a burden of love to be able to have this opportunity to give the fallen conditioned souls the opportunity to come to a temple, to see the deities, to hear the Bhagavatam. So there, it is also complete. Just like everything else, Prabhupada's program is complete. If someone is thinking, of course, relativity sneaks in even amongst devotees, and they think, oh, well, time and circumstances. This worked then, but it may not work now. Let's try something else. But this changing, Srila Prabhupada condemned. Changing what? His methods were somehow or other incomplete. You judge a thing by the results. When we tried to change certain things like distributing records, he said, no, don't do this. Don't do this. Because he saw what was our goal. Our goal was to get some income. So what is that? That denotes a lack of faith, that Krishna is a poor man and he can't provide. Yeah, everybody has bills. Temple also has bills. You know, so we understand that. You know, sometimes when you open the bill, especially in New York City, you get quite a shock. These are not small bills. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars just to have a temple. But there's a purpose. There's a reason why Srila Prabhupada wanted these temples, in order to facilitate devotees coming and beginning their spiritual life. It doesn't happen necessarily. It has to be there in the association of devotees. You know, so, should I read the translation again? Please explain how, merged in the body of the Lord, living beings are created, and how the infidels appear in the world. Also, please explain how the unconditioned living entities exist. Of course, living beings are not created. You know, the jiva is not created. So the question may be, because people are asking that, it's when does a living entity come into existence? The fact is, what does that say? For the soul, there's neither birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. So that's the answer. He doesn't. He's not created. But some people can't understand that eternity is a very, how can you say, difficult concept for many, because they have no experience of it. Everywhere around you, they see everything is temporary. Everything has a beginning and an end. So you have to explain to them how they're not their bodies. This is the first point. And this is the point at which everybody wakes up. When he realizes, I am not this body. I am spirit soul. Aham Brahmasmi. So we've seen it. We'll continue to see it. We should never give up in our attempts to deliver the highest philosophy. We don't have to worry about the result.